The Truman Show begins and ends with a falling star. They gave Truman Burbank everything a man could ever want. A beautiful home with a view of the endless horizon, a doting wife, an adoring BFF, a reassuring mother, a cushy desk job. The citizens of Sea Haven all seemed to be pleasant and polite members of society. Truman Burbank was never bullied or mugged or threatened. His safe space has been perfected. He is anything but a fish out of water. On another level, Truman's fear of the water is the strongest visual reference to the life and the outside world he never seems to find a reason to go after. Truman has never left home. That alone is tragic, and your heart immediately goes out to Truman.
Anything happen?
No.
Truman lost his father to the perils of the open water, an old standard of a story device, and this movie is littered with them, but that's the point. The engineers of this particular fable are crafting it not for what is best for Truman, but for what they think the audience wants to see. For almost 30 years, Truman has remained on this island. He is reliable, dependable, a virtual companion for the viewing audience. We occasionally cut to them, these lonely people, desperate for connection. Sure, some of them are in groups, but it seems there are more than Truman fans out there. There are true Truman fanatics. It is no question that Truman's civil rights are all being violated. People have tried to break in and warn him of his constant violations of privacy, autonomy, dignity. Let's not pretend the world did not watch him masturbate many times. The, quote, friends and family in Truman's life become anchors to him, keeping him in the confines of his prison. And since we are programmed to trust the people we have in our lives, especially in our inner circles, Truman just accepts this reality. These shadows on the wall seem real. Plato spoke of this in his allegory of the cave, and the false images that chained prisoners would see, thinking those images were real, and the only things holding them back from the truth was confinement and ignorance. This reinforced conditioning has left Truman a prisoner, a slave to the masses, solely existing for their entertainment. Truman's captors use media to manipulate the public's perception of Truman's situation. With clever editing and a musical underscore, they reinforce the grand illusion of virtue in this violation of Truman's privacy and autonomy. In other words, look, Truman isn't a slave. He's just like you. His world may be fake, but he's a real person, and you need to watch him go through these manufactured struggles. As long as Truman accepts the reality he was given, he'll never venture out of his comfort zone, or so they thought. Now, what is the catalyst of Truman's transformation? It is the falling light. The brightest light in the sky went out, perhaps the very light that had been blinding Truman his whole life. Unlike the dark dystopia of Orwell's 1984, this world only shows us the sunny days, and quite literally sweeping the clouds away. It carries some parallels to the classic authoritarian nightmare. Both Truman and Winston were guilt-ridden over the death of their parent, and came to find out later that their guilt was misplaced. There are also stark contrasts to the book. This may be the movie's way of declaring itself anti-Orwellian, which would make sense and would account for the multiple, quote, justifications of Truman's imprisonment. We, the audience, know going in that nothing is real except for Truman, and we are to be entertained by this. What does it say about the state of the outside world? Because I picture a very different one beyond the walls of Truman's safe haven. Do we dismiss our guilt in the name of dependability? Do we depend on Truman to be there for us? The movie also goes against the grain of going with your main character. We know it's all a show, and Truman does not at first, but with each discovery, with each clue he finds, we herald him. We want to yell, yes, the real world is just over the horizon. It's flawed and scary, filled with endless possibilities and pratfalls, but it is there, and it is real.
We found him. Truman. That's why I came by tonight. Sure, he's got quite a story to tell.
Truman's curiosity was conditioned out of him by servants of the one true God, represented here by Christoph. God has servants on multiple levels that do his bidding. His way, the Christoph way, is how Truman's life proceeds. Christoph arranges Truman's relationships, his phobias, all manufactured to produce a complacent guy who is somehow interesting to a global audience. God has a plan. Kristoff inhabits the moon, which from mythology states that the moon is the home of the creator of all mankind. Kristoff calls himself the creator, but he is actually the captor. Kristoff holds his prisoner back from escaping by dampening Truman's curiosity, hindering his ambition, undercutting his enthusiasm, and so on. Kristoff does this with tempting distractions. Another thing Kristoff does that keeps Truman on the island, he manipulates. Truman's captor is a clever sort, using what could only be called tricks right out of the League of Shadows playbook. Theatricality and deception are employed to manufacture outward phobias and inward doubt upon Truman. The greater truth is being suppressed, but what's more, Truman is being oppressed, all in the name of ratings. Not only must he remain complacent, but it is vital that he does so others can remain entertained and their advertisers remain happy. This is the very definition of cruelty. They throw everything at Truman, every roadblock, every detour. There is no road to freedom for Truman, no plane, not even a footpath. To escape the clutches of this false reality, Truman must face the thing he fears the most. From the moment his father reappears, Truman is acting. He knows he is being watched, and he plays into it. He knows the game is rigged and how it's rigged, and he is now into planning his escape. Truman uses their weapons against them. Smoke and mirrors, special effects and sound effects are employed to distract the watchers so Truman can make a mad dash for the real world. Truman realizes that freedom is not only possible, but attainable. At first, it's smooth sailing. Truman alone on his little boat, he can see for miles until God becomes wrathful. The rage of the supposed creator hits him with wind, rain, and lightning to get Truman to turn back and give up this silly quest for the truth. Truman and his detachment from his old life is also reborn. The sea births him back onto the small boat, and he is enlightened. The last-ditch effort of the false reality is to appeal to base emotions. Kristoff tries to appeal to a sense of vanity.
Who are you? I am the creator of a television show that gives hope and joy and inspiration to millions. Then who am I? You are the star.
In other words, the world, all the worlds, all the viewers, they revolve around you, Truman. How could you give that up? But Truman is not having it, so Kristoff next tries doubt.
Listen to me, Truman. There's no more truth out there than there is in the world I created for you.
Then sentimentality.
The episode when you lost your first.
And ends on plain old ego.
Say something, goddammit! You're on television! You're live to the whole world!
In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Prophetic, enjoyable, and surprising, The Truman Show is less science fiction and more social satire with futuristic elements paralleled with over-the-top silly elements thrown in for balance. Only in a movie like The Truman Show could you believe that a man was hiding in a Christmas present and that it would actually be a surprise. Wouldn't the Grips have noticed that when they moved in the box? Certainly not the first piece of satire to bend the principles of suspending your disbelief, but it doesn't matter because, as I have said, better to be an effective story than a perfect one. The movie is warning us to not teeter on the edge of that slippery slope, because before you know it, we've tweaked our media to where we now sensationalize good people getting hurt, or we just flat out normalize bad people. The movie exposes manipulation, corruption, mass surveillance. It has strong secular themes. It is also a character piece. Once Truman's core curiosity is lit, nothing stops him. Kristoff was right. The liar, the thief, the false god was right about that alone. The Truman Show is not anti-religious or anti-belief. The Truman Show is pro-discovery, and discovering new things does occasionally mean abandoning things you have outgrown. Truman outgrew his cage, his comfortable haven, and discovered who he truly was. It turns out that Truman Burbank is actually a very brave man. Also a remarkable man, leaving behind all the people in his life, his work, his community, setting out into the unknown. He did it all for a reason, and that reason was reason itself. The world he was living in was false. To discover your potential, you cannot go around, over, or under, but you must go through your fears, right down the middle of them. And to invoke the great Carl Sagan, Better to embrace the cold hard truth than a reassuring fable. Truman realizes that he is the custodian of his life's meaning. He is ready to take the true human, the Truman adventure, and it has only just begun.
Yeah, let's do it. Where's the TV guy?